Sweet friends, welcome back. Today I'm sharing 4 techniques for achieving that aged antique vessel look. Now these are super popular in all the high-end stores, but with that you're going to be paying that high price. Today I'll be using items from the Dollar Tree, from thrift stores, as well as some decor pieces that I no longer like the color, but I love the shape. So if you're excited for today's video, go ahead, give me a big thumbs up, and I hope you'll consider subscribing. Also, I would love if you would share any of your makeover transformations over on Instagram. You can tag me at simplyrhome. I would love to see how they turn out. Well, without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and try out this first technique. Here's an example of the finish we're going to try to recreate for hundreds less. To begin, we're going to start with this clear glass vase. Now you can find these super cheap at thrift stores, so I encourage you to be looking around for vessels that you love their shape and would love to try this technique on. The first step is to spray paint the entire piece matte black. What I'm using is the Fusion all-in-one paint and primer. Once that is completely dry, we'll move on to mixing 3 different colors of paints. The first one is Sherwood-Williams Sample to Go in the color Repose Gray. The second color that I'll be using is Sherwood-Williams Pediment, also in that Color to Go formula. Last but not least, I'm going to be using this super paint, again by Sherwood-Williams, in the Urban Bronze color. To create texture for that perfect aged vintage look, I'm going to add a heaping teaspoonful of cornstarch to each cup of paint. I'm starting first with the darkest color, which is the Urban Bronze, and to apply it, I'm going to be using this 1-inch chip brush that came as a set of 3 from Walmart. Now for this painting technique, I'm trying to keep all the brush strokes going horizontal. Now at first, as you can see, I applied a little too much paint at the bottom. So a tip is to make sure to dab off the excess paint onto a dry paper towel. As you can see, as I move up the vase, my brush strokes become more wispy and have a lot less product on them, which I really like a lot better. Now, if you do make a mistake, don't worry, you can easily correct it by going back in with a dry paper towel and just remove and blend that color into the black to make it look seamless. So that's what I'm doing right here. Now we can use that second color, which is Pediment, using that same technique, which is very wispy brush strokes, and we just went from that dark color straight into the lighter color without switching or cleaning brushes. Now for the third and lightest color, I'm just going to be blotting just here and there, kind of spotting this color so that it is not too intense, because a whiter color is hard to blend out. Then I'm just going back in with that dry paper towel and then just trying to make it blend and look seamless. At this point, I thought it was getting a little too chalky looking, so I'm going to go back in with the Urban Bronze to just darken it up, again going back over and blending it, keeping everything going horizontal in this technique. Now to add some earthy tones, I'm coming back in with Truffle and Fawn in Waverly chalk paint, and I'm just going to take a wet paper towel and then just very lightly wipe back and forth, adding more paint in certain areas and leaving it a little bit more sparse in others, and I think that just gives it that aged, really antiqued look. Once I was happy with that dark, more earthy tone, I'm going back in and just adding Fawn, again in just like little spotted areas to just add a little bit of a highlight and kind of just trying to mimic that first finish on that Pottery Barn piece. So again, here's a look at our inspiration piece, and let's remember back, we started with this plain glass vase, and using this technique, this is how it turned out. I really love the results. The aged patina adds so much character, and I really think it resembles the high-priced Pottery Barn finish. Next up, I'm going to try a technique to get the same Hobby Lobby medallion table art piece for less. To start, we're going to be using a plastic platter from the Dollar Tree along with a roll of toilet paper. To get this look of the original, we're going to use a paper mache type technique. Using the platter as a base, it's going to make the paper mache process go a lot quicker and have a lot less layers. First, we're going to start by separating the toilet paper into single ply sections, and then to create soft, smooth lines, we're going to remove the outer edges of the toilet paper square. To secure the paper sections to the platter, we're going to apply a generous amount of Mod Podge using a chip brush to paint the entire surface. We're going to mix Mod Podge with water, and in this solution we're going to spread over the top of each individual piece of paper. Make sure that when you're mixing your solution that it isn't too watery. If it is too thin, it can tear and break up your toilet paper. Now if this happens, just add a little bit more Mod Podge to thicken it up, and this should remedy the problem. Next, you're going to take a chip brush and just dab the tops of those sections, making sure to really saturate the piece of toilet paper completely. This is going to produce that hard, crackly appearance that we're after. Also, remember when you're applying those individual pieces, go ahead and overlap them quite a bit. This is going to provide you with that texture and the high points that we are looking for. You'll continue this process all the way along the top of your platter, and even to the edges. You can also allow some of that paper to wrap around to the back. If you want, you can even do this to the back. And then here you see I'm even adding just a little bit more in areas that look a little sparse to just add more texture. Now you're going to let this dry overnight. Now that it is dry, we're going to start making those individual circles, and we're going to again use the single ply. We're going to coil it up kind of like a snake, and then you're going to twist it. This will form the raised circular area that is in the original. To glue it all down, you are still using that mixture of water and Mod Podge, and you're using a good amount to saturate that toilet paper roll, and also just to put a little underneath to keep it in place. One tip I have for you when creating these elevated rings is to use smaller sections of the toilet paper. I tried to use longer sections, but it was just too much to try to coil and spin and apply it to the platter. So go ahead and just take your time and coil individual smaller pieces. It's just a lot easier for me to work with in the long run. For the edges, I did the exact same thing, and I even allowed some of the paper to wrap around to the back. Again, I used a lot of that water and glue Mod Podge to secure it in place. So here's what the piece looks like. We need to go ahead and let that completely dry and harden up overnight before we start our chalk paint. So here the next day I started with some chiffon cream chalk paint in this Medallion brand, and all I'm doing is just going in with a chip brush and really getting into all those nooks and crannies that are created in that paper mache look. So once that is done and we've completely covered it with the chiffon cream, we'll go back in with the fawn chalk paint from Waverly to hit all of those high points. And this is going to really enhance all of those high points and texture. And this is where the piece begins to take shape and look a lot like the original. One tip I found helpful was to take a smaller chip brush and actually apply the paint onto the bristles of the larger brush. This allowed me to get the right amount of paint in the larger brush. Then I laid that large brush almost flat and just drug it along the piece. This way it made sure that it was just hitting the high points. So too much pressure or too much paint will get into that lower creamy area, and that's not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to enhance the top and the high points of the piece. Now you can continue to add as much color or as little as you like. To really make those rings pop, I went back in with the smaller chip brush and just hit those so that they would just be enhanced and really appear darker than their surroundings. So here is the Hobby Lobby piece we're trying to dupe. This is the plate that we had before, and then after this technique, this is how the piece turned out. And I think it looks super great and very similar to the original at a fraction of the cost. Moving on, for this next technique, I'll be trying to duplicate this restoration hardware finish to these two vases that I no longer love. So for this project, we're going to be using the Rust-Oleum cream chiffon chalk paint, and then we're going to add some baking soda. This should add lots of texture to these otherwise shiny plain vases. Taking the largest of the three chip brushes, I'm just going to quickly go around and paint the entire vase that chiffon cream and let that dry. To cover up the dark blue, I went ahead and added a second coat, and then while it was still wet, I went in with a wet crumpled paper towel and stomped the entire surface of the vessel. And just look at all that texture. It looks a lot like stone now. I'll only be using two colors for this piece, the fawn and the truffle in the Waverly chalk paint. Now I'm starting first with a wet paper towel, and I'm using the dark truffle color, and I'm trying to concentrate that more along the bottom, and then I start bringing in the fawn color, and I just noticed as you press with the wet paper towel, it really blends it in. So don't be afraid to get in there and really smush it into all the crevices and make it really nice and blended. As I moved towards the middle, I tried to concentrate more of the fawn color, and then when I got towards the top, I added in more of the darker color. Now you're just going to continue to layer color on top of color and just continuing to blend. And what I found was the wetter the paper towel, the better for the blending to saturate out. And if you kind of just smush it and wiggle it a little bit, the color is blended even better. So definitely go in with some pounces and then go in with a more smushy type feel, if you know what I mean. But I think this technique is super easy, and you can correct your mistakes. If you get something too dark, you can come back in with your lighter color and vice versa. So just have fun with it, and once it's dry, you're going to be surprised at how stone-like it looks. And of course, you can see I did this technique to both of the vases. This is what our inspiration restoration hardware piece looked like, and this is what we started with, and then here is the after. Again, it's so stone-like, and it just has that age vintage feel and something more authentic looking. Last but not least, we're taking inspiration from another restoration hardware piece, and here is the small bowl we're starting with to duplicate that finish on. For this DIY, we're going to be using dry deck spackling to create some texture. What I love about this particular spackling is that it goes on pink, and when it's dry, it turns white. I'm noticing that it looks a little bit odd because it normally is darker bright pink, but now it's light pink. So we may need to replace this here shortly. All I'm doing is scooping out some and then smearing it on the outside edges as well as into the interior, making sure to cover as much of the surface as possible. Definitely wearing these gloves made this process a little bit easier. Now I'm not worrying about how chunky or textured it looks because in the next step, what we're going to be doing once it is totally and completely dry is going back in with a very fine grit sandpaper and lightly sanding off those rough edges. After that is done on the inside and outside, I'm going back in with the Rust-Oleum chalk paint and the cream chiffon and covering the piece completely so that none of that original blue color is peeking through. To create that old stone cement appearance, I'm lightly painting it first with the leftover Urban Bronze cornstarch mixture that we used in the previous project and the pediment color from that project as well. To get a more muddy, uniform appearance, I'm taking a large chip brush dipped in just plain water and applying that to the surface. And this really creates a muddy, uniform appearance of the two colors together. And then now it's time to start stippling on the different colors. And so I'm going in with that darker truffle color, making sure not to have too much on the wet paper towel. And then now I'm just going to be stomping that color on, pressing in some places and smearing it around in others. Then I'll go back in with that fawn color in the same way. And if I get anything too dark, I'm bringing in a dry paper towel and then just swiping that across, and that really just blends it all out. To add just a little bit of a variation of a lighter color, I'm just dotting on some of the Repost Gray, adding some water to really just blend it all together. Then again, just adding more depth, I'll go back in with some of the truffle color, just adding layers up on layers. To create the pitted look that cement has, I'm taking a Q-tip and dipping that into the cream chiffon. Then I'm just spinning and rolling it across the surface, and I'll do this with both the cream chiffon and the fawn, blending it out, and I think this is just going to make it look even more authentic, adding more water because I think again that just blends it and makes it all uniform. Let's go ahead and remember our inspiration piece, and then here is the before and what we started with, and then here is the after. It is totally transformed and looks like an authentic piece. Okay friends, there you have it. That is the 4 techniques that I use to achieve these aged antique vessels. I really love how they turned out. You'll have to let me know which was your favorite. I think mine was the first one, the glass vase. I think the patina on that is absolutely gorgeous. So I do hope today's video was helpful and enjoyable. If it was, go ahead and give me a big thumbs up. That really helps me out. And I hope that you would consider subscribing. I would love to have you back. Remember, if you try any of these techniques, I would love for you to tag me on simplyrhome over on Instagram. I would love to see your makeover pieces. Now, before we go, I'd like to share with you today's Bible verse, which comes from Isaiah 64:8. And it reads, "Yet, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay and you are the potter. We are all the work of your hand." Now, friends, if you have any prayer requests, you can go ahead and leave those down in the comments as well. I would love to pray for you. And the best way to do that is to leave them under the comment that I pin at the beginning of each video. That way we can easily go and see who's needing prayer, and we can pray all together as a community for you. Well, guys, thanks again for spending your day with me, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. I'll see you next time, and it will be my office reveal. I'm super excited to share that with you. So I'll see you then. Take care, and God bless. Bye.